Flying Brian here. Today I'm going on an explorer that will take me to the quiet, rural back roads and byways of Spartanburg County, South Carolina. I'm in search of a long-forgotten, long-lost, but very interesting piece of American aviation history. And if you are so inclined, why don't you come along for the road trip and find out exactly what it is I'm looking for. Few pilots know they owe a debt of gratitude to the U.S. Post Office. And that is what today's Explorer is all about. Pilots flying today have never known an environment without reliable and very accurate electronic navigation equipment. However, that was not always the case. The question might be asked, how did it all start? As World War I was coming to an end in Europe, the U.S. Post Office was eager to improve the speed of mail delivery. They experimented with moving mail by aircraft, and on 15 May 1918, they made their first official airmail flight between New York and Washington, D.C. However, aircraft of the day were marginally reliable and far from being able to fly in all weather. Pilots were faced with flying across the country without aviation charts, without nav aids, in open cockpit airplanes, and they could not safely fly at night. All of which made early airmail service less successful than hoped. Nonetheless, the Post Office pressed on and continued to expand routes, service, and looking for ways to improve navigation and to make flying the mail at night viable. Their solution is what I am looking for today. As the 1920s were ushered in, the mail service had come up with a navigation solution and was busy installing that solution along their new airmail routes. The system consisted of large concrete arrows laid in the landscape that could easily be seen by pilots flying overhead. Spaced out every 10 miles or so, they provided pilots with visual cues along the route. To address the night flying question, a 53-foot tall tower equipped with a rotating beacon light was erected at each of the arrows. As darkness fell, the beacons were turned on, lighting a path for these early airmail pilots. All they had to do now is fly from light to light. By the late 1920s, these huge arrows and light beacons were becoming commonplace, with over 1,500 dotting the countryside from coast to coast, keeping airmail pilots on course day and night. A typical beacon site consisted of a large concrete foundation cast in the form of an arrow that could be seen from the air. The tail end of the arrow was a rectangular pad where an equipment shed was normally constructed. In the center of the arrow was a square foundation where a steel tower was erected. A rotating beacon would be placed atop the tower and would operate at night and in low weather conditions. In addition, a separate fixed red or green light was typically installed below the beacon. A green light indicated the beacon was on an airfield. Red meant it was not. The beacon system worked extremely well, and airmail delivery was greatly improved. During the 1930s, electronic nav aids began to make their way onto the scene. Radio beacons, the AN radio range, and radar were quickly making light beacon navigation obsolete. Then, in the midst of the Great Depression, President Roosevelt defunded the program, causing many beacon stations to go dark. While some beacons and routes continued to operate, by the mid-1940s, light beacon navigation had pretty much been replaced with radio aids. Most of the remaining beacon sites were decommissioned and went permanently dark. Towers were taken down and sites were abandoned. Over time, they were forgotten about. Development erased them by the hundreds from the landscape, and finding one today might leave one scratching their head wondering what the heck they are looking at. Today, I am in search of the only surviving beacon station in the Carolinas. It is beacon number 14 on the route known as CAM 19, or Contract Airmail Route number 19. And take a look at this. I am here in rural Spartanburg County, South Carolina, at one of the long-lost lighted airway beacon sites. It is indeed the location of beacon number 14 on the Atlanta to New York airmail route. The head of the arrow points directly at the Spartanburg downtown airport, 10 miles distant. The first airmail contract awarded on this route went to the Pitcairn Aviation Company. And if it were still the 1920s, you could have looked up and seen one of the Pitcairn mail wings flying overhead to his next stop at Spartanburg. I imagine that few people that pass this quiet crossroads have much appreciation for this old concrete arrow left over from a bygone era. Fewer yet can appreciate that the actions taken by the U.S. Post Office back in 1918 were the very seeds that kick-started the development of the sophisticated modern nav aids we now take for granted. How long will it be before this arrow succumbs and is lost forever? Remember, life is a journey. Enjoy the ride. And thank you for watching.